Hey all, welcome back. So this video is a little different from the practical tutorials that I usually post. And these are essentially some slides I wanted to share based on our experience serving many Grafana dashboards to numerous customers and learning a lot along the way. And these are some key insights and requirements for improving performance in a production environment and keeping it secure. So I hope you find these helpful. Also, please feel free to comment on any topic from the slides for which you want more in-depth information. I'd be happy to create a detailed video. With that said, let's get started. Now, the first step is essentially the usual, making your Grafana server HTTPS instead of HTTP. Using HTTPS instead of HTTP ensures secure, encrypted communication, and it also protects data integrity, and it verifies website identity, which is always great and something that helps in gaining the trust of the customers. The second thing is two-factor authentication. Now, more and more customers or the companies that we work with have been asking for this. And again, this is essentially to provide a little extra security on top of, let's say, HTTP authentication or any auth-based authentication that you might have on your Grafana website. Now, the third thing, which is really important, is external database. So Grafana by default comes with SQLite 3 as a local storage, and it holds the configuration information like users, dashboards, alerts. So everything that's internal to Grafana, it gets stored in SQLite 3 database. So for development, it's fine, it works well, but for a production environment, I would highly recommend to move all of those configuration information out of there and move it to an external database. It could be SQL or MySQL Server or whatever database you fancy. So how this helps is essentially if there's a problem in the server, if it crashes and you're not able to recover it, you have that external database and you can spin up a new Grafana instance and point to your external database and yeah, you can get going. So I would highly recommend HTTPS, two-factor authentication, and external databases for your Grafana environment. Now, the next step is essentially loading images from the Grafana server itself. So in our dashboards, and this is true for most of the dashboards that we serve, we have a lot of assets, and they could be big images or these small icons and numerous other videos or GIFs. Actually, this uh, image is a video. So yeah. So it's actually a GIF, and based on the conditions, it updates. So it could turn gray, it could turn yellow or red based on the component health. And this is pretty heavy for the website. And similarly, imagine if you're loading similar assets throughout the page, this increases the load of the whole website and makes things pretty slow. So I would recommend using the Grafana server to store the assets. So instead of calling this GIF or all these images from a third-party hosted environment, it'll be easier and much faster to essentially pull these images from the Grafana server itself. And that'll help in improving the latency of the website. It'll save some dollars because essentially you are minimizing the load of the bandwidth or the data transfer. And if you're on cellular, this matters a lot, and it automatically improves performance because the assets are stored in the server itself, so they load in few seconds. And this is something that we realized recently and improved the performance of this page by 5x. And a quick way to do this is to use value mappings. And this is inbuilt option in Grafana panels, actually most of the panels. So we use overrides, we use value mapping to map the index. So let's say 0 is mapped to X image, one is mapped to Y image, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, we have actually 200 value maps here. So that means 200 images. So how this helps is now when you fetch that information from an API or a data source, you're essentially just getting the index from the API. So let's say based on the conditions, I get 5 as my result from the API. And based on that 5, I need to show a certain image. And then with this override, we can actually just show the image loaded directly from the Grafana server itself. And we are fetching the index from the API. And I've already done a video on how you can use HTTP APIs in Grafana, so you don't have to directly connect to a database. You can call APIs in Grafana panels. I'll leave a link to that video in the description below, so feel free to check that out. Moving on, use cache. So because this is a pretty heavy website and we are loading a lot of information from our APIs, so imagine if the numbers of user increase from 1 to 100 on this dashboard. That means 100x the API calls on each of these panels, and these are all individual panels. So to improve the performance of this dashboard, it'll be better to cache the data, and you can cache the data many ways. And Grafana caching is pretty good already, but to cache the data, example, let's say on this curve or this plot, we are pulling a lot of data, past 24 hours of data, just on this curve. So instead of pulling this data every time the user refreshes the page or based on the refresh counter, we can store the data in the context. How that will help is, and that will load the data from the context, irrespective of how many users are currently logged into the system. And because we are using APIs instead of database, we can control what information gets populated here. There's a much granular control over the data being pushed back to Grafana. So based on the selected time range, we can add some transformations or reduce the data to make it load faster. So that's essentially smart loading of the panels. So this helps in reducing server load because you're not hitting APIs based on the number of users, but based on a certain condition. Let's say you are fetching data every minute and saving it to the context. That data gets served to your users from that context instead of them coming to the page and hitting refresh. You're saving resources and improving performance because load on the database, on the system, or your API server is much less because the dashboard doesn't depend on the number of users who are currently logged in, but the dashboard runs through this context that you keep as a cache to serve the users or the dashboard. Another thing that most of the customers care about, especially in production environment, is some sort of audit log. Now, because we are using API, we can easily track who's accessing what information and when they logged in, what dashboard they're viewing. So we keep another database with all the logging information, like the ID of the user, the email, when was the user last seen, username, the dashboard they accessed, and what was the last active date, for example. So you can make this much more complicated than what it is right now. But this is, again, another thing that customers do care about when anything goes into production. All right, and this is all I have for you in this video. So here's an example architecture. So we are using Prescient Designer here as an API server, and this is essentially our main tool that pulls data from different APIs or edge sources. It could be sensors, edge computers, edge machines. So we do all the transformation inside Prescient Designer, which is running on the cloud. And then this serves the Grafana dashboard. And all the panels in the Grafana dashboards are using APIs instead of databases. So essentially, if the dashboard requests this data, it calls Prescient Designer, and then you can control what get displayed on this panel right here. And again, we are using an external Grafana database to keep things separate from the Grafana server itself. So I hope this kind of gave you some idea of what to expect when running Grafana in a production environment. Feel free to check out more videos on Prescient Designer, because that makes integrating and maintaining all of this a breeze. It's essentially a few clicks of a button, and you don't have to maintain API servers or create APIs manually. We already have that whole framework set up for you. Uh, that's about it. Thank you.